unless we get this globally under control, there's a very good chance that it will assume a seasonal nature, in the sense that even if we, and I hope it's not just if, but when we get it down to the point where it really is at a very low level, we need to be prepared that since it unlikely will be completely eradicated from the planet, that as we get into next season, we may see the beginning of a resurgence. And that's the reason why we're pushing so hard in getting our preparedness much better than it was, but importantly, pushing on a vaccine and doing clinical trials for therapeutic interventions so that hopefully, if in fact we do see that resurgence, we will have interventions that we did not have in the beginning of the situation that we're in right now.
What would those interventions be? There's a lot of talk right now about hydroxychloroquine. I will get to that in a few moments. The most up-to-date information that we've been able to pull together, as well as anecdotal information from frontline doctors that I talked to. I spent a lot of time on the phone yesterday with a doc who's a brilliant guy, and he was talking to me about, the different virus microns and blah. I was like, whoa, doc, speak to me like I work in media, which means I basically don't know anything. So unfortunately, that's what the media is full of, people that think that they didn't have to do homework, and they're wrong. They should have done more homework. But Dr. Fauci is telling you something here that you have to remember, and that is that as long as it takes chorus, lockdown as long as it takes, also has already baked into their analysis that we're probably going to have to do another lockdown in the fall. So even if we ended this, let's say in June, come September, we're going to have another lockdown. Nope. Not gonna work. People aren't going to do it. They can tell me that you need to do this, right? The hall monitor attitude that a lot of people are taking about this, how dare you go into your front yard? I saw someone I know actually went out into their yard in D.C. and was lifting weights in their own yard, no one around them for at least 30 feet by himself. So they called the cops on him. They're calling the cops on him. We'll get into this hall monitor attitude about our fellow Americans. This is crazy. People need to exercise some judgment about what they think is bad judgment. But we're going to go back to a lockdown as soon as the fall. Maybe we have better interventions. Maybe we got better medicines for this. Hopefully, we'll see. Every time I read about some promising new therapy, not the ones that have already gotten a lot of attention, they're saying, we're hoping to be in human trials by August or September. And, no, we don't have a year of lockdown while medical authorities decide that the risk is low enough for us to start living our lives again. We're just going to reach mass noncompliance at some point. And this is obvious. I mean, people, I don't know why there's this mentality that anybody who's saying this is being a bad person or being irresponsible. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but at some point people are just going to say, no, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to do what I have to do. I'm going to start living my life more and more. And what are we going to have? The authorities locking people up? They're going to put you in a cell where you'll be at risk from COVID because of the density and because you wanted to go and live. You wanted to live your life. This is going to become a huge problem. We need to start understanding that what Fauci says here, globally under control. Oh, so America is not going to be able to go back about its business because some other countries are going to struggle with this? I mean, I got news for Fauci. Other countries struggle with a lot of things that don't shut us down. And this is where, epidemiologists, he understands more about how a virus latches onto certain proteins and, the processes by which infection occurs and all this. He doesn't know anything more than anybody else about what happens when people are told to stay in their homes for 6 months. He has no idea. It's never been done before. So we're just going to sit around and say, we're going to let this happen. We're going to let this continue to drag on in this way. No, we need a date, at least set a date that is the reevaluation metric, right? Let's say that it's Memorial Day. By Memorial Day, we need to look at where we are and decide. And that for some of you probably are going to say that's way too far off. Whatever the date is, we can't just be dragged along like this while the experts tell us that they're going to figure out what the future holds. We cannot wait for a cure to go back to living normal lives. And ultimately, when he says, when the risk gets very, very low, absent a cure and absent some miracle breakthrough, if this is out there, there's going to be risk of it. And we know a little bit more about how to deal with it. But That means that if we go back to normal life, and this is what no one seems to want to say right now, but at some point, if we go back to a greater degree of normalcy, I'm not even talking about full normal life. That's a long way away, unfortunately, right now. We go back to greater normalcy, that means that people could get this and people could die from it that perhaps wouldn't have under the extreme lockdown scenario. We're going to reach a point where someone has to make that call. Someone's going to have to make that decision. And it's dishonest and it's gross to suggest that whoever that person is, whether it's the president or Fauci or the team, whoever it is, somehow doesn't care about people dying. Because then we do get back to, well, then I guess we need to shut down every year for 3 months because that would knock down flu death by 75%. Do the 30 or 40,000 people who die from flu every year, do they not count? Now, I'm not saying this is not worse than the flu. It is worse than the flu, but the principle must stand then, right? If there's no risk, that is tolerable for a society to be able to allow people to live their lives when there's the possibility of infectious disease killing people from that openness, what is our future really? This becomes very troubling very quickly. And, Fauci, first of all, was catastrophically wrong about this in January, February? Catastrophically. So people are telling me, oh, you're not an expert. You don't know anything. Okay. If my entire life was to prevent this from happening or at least give warning when it's about to happen, if that's my entire life's work, I would feel pretty iffy about what's gone on so far from how I would have done, right? I mean, if you're Fauci and this is your moment, this is your opportunity to avert Pearl Harbor yourself. And instead you're saying, yeah, I don't think the Japanese aircraft carriers are going to be a problem for us. Let's keep those planes wingtip to wingtip all lined up on the runway because we're worried about sabotage. I think you'd feel bad about that afterwards. And it's very hard to separate the anti-Trump hysteria from people who think that he doesn't care, he doesn't know what he's doing, he's evil, from just the panic, the good faith, but still panicked response that some people are having to, oh, we can't handle this, and try to start achieving a new normal, a greater degree of normalcy. This is getting to fundamental questions of freedom and the government's role in our lives and what's acceptable for them to tell us. And, at some point, the government isn't able to just give you direction, give you dictation, and you have to say, yeah, sure, whatever, right? We all know this. We're a country that's kind of founded on that there are some things the government's not allowed to just do. And when they're saying things like we might be in this for 18 months, I just... Or we're going to have a resurgence of this. We're going to wait till the deaths get very, very, very low. Here's where this is heading right now. New York has had, remember, deaths occur after infections that are 2 to 3 weeks old. Hospitalizations, which occur within 7 to 10 days, are a much more important indicator of where this is trending. Well, Cuomo just had his press conference here in New York, and we are the worst hit place, and new hospitalizations for COVID-19 are down in the last couple of days, 75%. So the hospitalizations are way down. There's a lot of people in the hospitals fighting for their lives. I get that. And there are a lot of people that are dying who've already been put in the hospital in the last 2 weeks. I get that too. But if you're looking at where the trend is going now, you have a big drop off in hospitalizations over the last 48 to 72 hours, which is an indicator that there are far fewer people, relatively speaking, who are coming down with really serious versions of this illness in New York right now. And we are in the worst phase of it. So you know what's going to happen? There's going to be a big fight, and it's going to start in the next couple of days if it doesn't already happen. If it's not already underway when you hear me saying this, there's going to be a big fight over, did we overreact? Or did we save countless lives and it's already working? The lockdowns are the reason this is already happening. You're going to look at the timelines and say, hold on a second, we've been in lockdown for a couple of weeks and it's brought the curve down this much? Really? And so what does that mean going forward? And what does it mean for our policy? These are real questions we're going to have to ask. have been told that there's this enormous rush on ventilators. You know, we're going to need 100,000 ventilators, 1 million ventilators, all these unlimited ventilators. Nancy Pelosi, I think, recently, we need unlimited ventilators. We don't have unlimited anything. I mean, this is getting absurd. The people that have been shouting everybody else down for needing to do everything that they're told, don't question it, and you need to take this more seriously, they're going to have some explaining to do about why we shouldn't now look at them and say, hold on a minute. Why were your numbers so off? Why are the numbers so off? And, there's going to be a very tense conversation here, because remember this as well. If we get out of this in reasonably, how do we even describe this? If it's clear from the numbers that Trump did a good job addressing this once the seriousness of it became known, and you start to get the economy turned back on and the market starts going up and up and up, it'll be slow, it'll be gradual, but if that started to happen, then they know that Trump's going to be president for 4 more years, right? I mean, this is ultimately in the background of a lot of this discussion. They figure that people have suffered from this. There's been a lot of loss of life, loss of job, loss of life savings, careers. There's been a lot of that already. There is an element on the left that believes that that is going to be something that must result in Trump losing his job. They do view it that way. They view it that way. And anything that deviates from that will receive tremendous pushback. And meanwhile, you've also got Joe Scarborough, for example, who's establishing right now that this is all about the politics for him. I mean, he's an imbecile and a disgrace. But here's what he says. Play 7.
It's so interesting, Mika, that now a lot of the same hacks that were saying that this was overblown, a lot of those same hacks are now actually trying to turn it around and say it was the media's fault for not underlining the concerns about this. So
right.
Here's the deal. You're stupid. I know you're stupid. If you're being a hack for Donald Trump on the coronavirus, I know you're stupid. So maybe you think other people are stupid. They're not as dumb as you, because you can't argue that the press was overblowing it for 2 months.
The press actually dramatically underblew it. You complete moron. But look, he's paid to be a fake conservative who goes on TV and trashes anybody on the right for the amusement of liberals. I mean, that is his job. That is his job description. So I suppose he's doing a good job in that sense. But there will not be a rewriting of history here. This disease was worse than many of us thought. The disease was worse than I thought. But the people that were supposed to know how bad it was were wrong. Fauci was wrong. New York State and city health authorities were wrong. The major newspapers, the major media outlets were wrong. We're not going to do this thing now where, only Trump people didn't know that this was bad. Everybody else knew it was fine. Or that it was terrible, rather. No. We're not going to allow that to happen, because we understand that this is just the politics of this now overtaking the actual argument about what should happen to keep the most people safe and to keep American civilization intact, which is another. I think that that's something we're allowed to talk about. I think that that's a concern that's valid at this point in time.
So first of all, it's not a 9/11 level failure. It's much greater than that. As Andy Slavitt said recently, it's the greatest public health failure in 100 years. So think of that. And think of the death toll in Afghanistan and Iraq, Vietnam. If any of the projections hold true, most of the wars that we've seen in our lifetime will be dwarfed by the death toll of this pandemic. Now, what we need is really a Marshall Plan or a New Deal for public health. We need to scale up personal protective equipment. We're in April now, and we don't have these vital tools that doctors and nurses and healthcare workers need to protect themselves.
Notice that you have the casualty comparison here already, and calling it a failure and a 9/11, worse than 9/11 as a failure of government. That's what they're saying. And the casualty count issue comes up where they say that there will be more people who die from this than, say, died in the Iraq, Americans who died in the Iraq War. Okay, well, there's also more people who die from the flu every single year than died in the Iraq War. I mean, what is that really saying? It's a virus. There was no world in which this wasn't going to end up spreading to America and hurting people and killing some people. That's not realistic at all. The only real question is, what are the numbers and what are the projections versus what ends up being the final tally? And was everything done that could be reasonably be done in the process to save as much life as possible? There was no beating. No country figured out how to beat this virus from day one. Nobody. I mean, this would be like saying, if you get hit with an earthquake, why didn't you stop the buildings from shaking, right? No, they're going to shake, but how well do you deal with the aftermath? How quickly do you put first responders out there? It's just context here matters so much. This is the first time, and it does really put into perspective all the other stuff, all the other anti-Trump narratives of the past were just absurd. There were non-issues that they made into huge national scandals. We're all supposed to care. Non-issues. The Ukraine phone call, Russia collusion. This was all crap. The payoff of Stormy Daniels was supposed to be some huge national issue. Oh no, the Stormy Daniels payoff. What a just a laughable pile of nonsense. Media was obsessed with it. Now they've got a real problem. So you have to remember, the same people that could make a national tragedy, a national scandal out of nothing, now have a real national tragedy to work with politically, and they're going to do everything they can for maximum impact against the administration. Here's here's Rahm Emanuel, for example, using the same narrative here, that this is all showing us that Trump wasn't ever up for this. Play 16.
Hoover got replaced because he didn't measure up to the Depression. This president's not measuring up. We lost, and the country now knows we lost critical time. And I would just say to you, we have an acting Secretary of the Navy replaced a 20-year career veteran of the Navy, and that's not right, and Congress should have a hearing on it.
So he just moved into, he got into the Navy thing too? I mean, Rahm Emanuel is the guy who said never let a crisis go to waste when people were concerned about the complete meltdown of the global financial system and the freezing of credit markets. I mean, that could have been, if there hadn't been action that was taken by the Bush administration, by the way. This always gets forgotten. Like, Obama saved us. Obama just showed up and was like, I'm going to spend a whole lot of money to get the economy going. Didn't work very well. The Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP, that was a Bush administration initiative. But they never frame it that way, do they? But if Rahm Emanuel, if you remember, when people were really concerned about whether their businesses would be able to continue, would they be able to put food on the table, whether the global financial system would be intact or not, he thought that was an opportunity, and the Democrats did. They exploited it as an opportunity for political gain. So there's anyone who tells you right now, who's a loud voice on this issue, who says that politics is not playing a major role, is either not very bright or is not paying attention. This is about to get intensely, it already is political, it's going to become intensely political.
I'm not acting as a doctor. I'm saying do what you want, but there are some good signs. You've read the signs, I've read the signs. With the other one, there's some very good signs also. Different going together works very well, but there may be an indication that if you have a problem with your heart, you shouldn't take what we call the Z-Pak. You shouldn't take it, and that's okay. But I would love to go to a laboratory and spend a couple of years testing something. We don't have time. We don't have 2 hours because there are people dying right now. If it does help, great. If it doesn't help, we gave it a shot.
The president talking about hydroxychloroquine, which I also refer to as chloroquine sometimes. Not to be confused with chloroquine phosphate, the fish tank cleaner that somebody drank that the media... Remember, the media blamed Trump for that. Which, as I've said, is like a doctor telling me to put more sodium in my diet, and then if I were to eat a bunch of sodium cyanide pellets with my steak, that's on me. That's not the doctor's fault. The very obvious rooting against chloroquine that is going on in some media quarters, they don't think of it. They think they're rooting against Trump rooting for it. That's how in their heads, that's what it really turns into. they're doing us a favor by not letting Trump create false hope. That's what they would respond if you push them on this. It's absurd. It's bizarre. Every press conference, we have the same question. Trust me, if they had new data to support this, they would tell us. But there's always excuse me, President Trump, do you think you created false hope by saying chloroquine? I mean, these journalists are morons, really. Many of the dumbest people in public life in this country are journalists, and a lot of them are more of the press corps asking questions at the White House type. I mean, just imbeciles, really. You know, we deserve better as a country right now that we're getting from a lot of journalists that are asking the dumbest questions imaginable to the President of the United States in the midst of a crisis. But the president isn't overstating this. He has not overstated it. It is not accurate. It is not true to suggest that the president is doing, is somehow wrong here for expressing a hopefulness that this will work. That's all it is. Hopefulness. Right? I thought we liked hope. We liked hope and change. Can we like hope here? Here's the president saying, look, it may not. Play 9.
Because we know long term what I want to save lives. And I don't want it to be in a lab for the next year and a half as people are dying all over the place.
It's already out there. Doctors are already able to prescribe it off label.
That's right. All I'm doing
so what
is
do you
saying,
accomplish?
Well, I'll tell you what I accomplished. We bought massive amounts of it, 29 million doses of it. We have it coming from all of the labs. We're actually now doing it here because in case it does work, we want to have it. And we've given it to drugstores. We're sending it all over. FEMA's doing it. We're doing it through different channels, many different channels, including the companies that make it. It's a very special thing. Now, it may not work, in which case, hey, it didn't work. And it may work, in which case it's going to save a lot of lives. Now, a lot of people say if the people walking in prior to getting it, if they take it, it has a profound effect. Well, maybe it doesn't, maybe it doesn't. I don't want to wait a year and a half to find out.
What are they not understanding here? This doesn't seem like it's a complicated storyline. The press, they're always pushing them on chloroquine. Oh, you said this, and are you giving people false hope? The president says, he speaks to them like they're morons, which is good because a lot of them are morons. The president says, look, I've let doctors, I've said that doctors are using this. The FDA really has opened it up. So for doctors who want to use this, they can. It's a clear drug. Every drug has some side effects. Every drug is lethal if you take too much of it. Water is lethal. True story. If you drink it too much too fast, you can die from water. Okay. So these stories that I saw a week or two ago of if you had, 5 grams of chloroquine, yeah, if you take 100 doses of it at once, it's probably going to kill you. No one's that stupid. So why? Oh, the media is that dumb, apparently. Why even write that? But they seem to think that speaking truth to power or holding Trump accountable means trying to poke holes that aren't there in what he's saying about chloroquine or about the drug itself. He's saying that, look, we're trying to do everything we can. This is an all hands on deck scenario. We're letting doctors who think it's worth prescribing prescribe it. These people are under the care of a physician. They're obviously at high risk for a really bad outcome of COVID-19. So that has to be, this is risk mitigation once again. But people want to play games with this. They want to play games with it. Oh, what if somebody who takes chloroquine has an adverse reaction? What if they die from it? People die from Tylenol. Does that mean you can't take Tylenol? Do we really have to explain this to the idiots out there? It's like they've forgotten how society actually functions, or at least they're pretending to because it's useful right now to ask the president very dumb questions. I've spoken to frontline doctors who say that it's too early for them to tell about chloroquine. There's also some indication that chloroquine with zinc works very well. It's all about how far along is the patient? How quickly do you get them the dosage? There are variables that factor into this that we have to get more answers before we really know what's going on here. But there's so much anecdotal information out there about this from MDs who have spent their lives treating patients that there's more than enough, evidence that this is worth letting doctors try to help people save lives. This would be like imagine if journalists showed up every day. Forget about the pandemic that's going on right now for a second. Imagine if journalists showed up every day and said, "Excuse me, Mr. President, but the FDA has cleared right to try for people that have terminal cancer and are stage 4 and there's no approved treatment for them. The FDA has cleared right to try for those people. So, well, what do you say to the people who might die from the treatment that they're using to try to save their lives?" Wouldn't you look at them and say, "Are you just, excuse me, journo, are you a total idiot?" The whole point here is that they're trying to save lives, and yes, there are risks, but this is an intelligent risk to take. If you have terminal cancer and you think that there's enough to support trying a drug before it's cleared for everybody and told that it's safe and everything else, you should be able to do that. This is, under a physician's care, essentially a version of right to try. And not only is it right to try, it's right to try in a context where there are plenty of doctors out there who are saying this is really promising. Notice the words. No one out there right now that is really getting attention. I mean, I saw that guy on Tucker's show, what was it, a week or two ago, said, we've killed the virus, so this is a cure. And Tucker, to his credit, was like, okay, well, we can't check that, but, we'll see. 'Cause that was a lot. I mean, when you say a cure, that makes people think you take this and there's a 90% plus chance you're going to be fine. That's not where we are. We're not there yet. And we may never get there. But here is, for example, Dr. Anthony Cardillo. I don't think any relative of John Cardillo, the conservative commentator who is taking a lot of heat on Twitter for trying to think outside the box. Here's Dr. Anthony Cardillo saying that this is his experience with hydroxychloroquine and patients that he's treating with COVID-19. Play 6.
What we're finding clinically with our patients is that it really only works in conjunction with zinc. So the hydroxychloroquine opens the zinc channel, zinc goes into the cell, it then blocks the replication of the cellular machinery. So it has to be used in conjunction with zinc. Every patient I've prescribed it to has been very, very ill, and within 8 to 12 hours, they were basically symptom-free. And so clinically, I am seeing a resolution. That mirrors what we saw in the French study and some of the other studies worldwide. But what I am seeing is that people that are taking it alone by itself, it's not having efficacy.
Very interesting. Seems like progress, right? Seems like good news. Yet the way it's reported on by many of the press, it's hard not to feel like they aren't rooting against this. Imagine if we got to a point where we understood that hydroxychloroquine and zinc taken together early enough as an early enough intervention might be able to bring the mortality rate of this down to, let's say, for not even just the mortality rate, might limit people. If you could limit people on the ventilators from the 2 to 3 weeks many of them are spending on ventilators right now, if all of a sudden it were more standard, which my doctor friends tell me is usually 2 to 3 days on a ventilator is what you see for patients for other issues, not COVID-19. If you could bring that down and then get them and send them home and they're okay after this, and let's say that was true of 90% of patients, even 70 or 80% of patients, be a game changer in the fight against this disease. Be fantastic. And we wouldn't be out of the woods entirely, but then we'd realize this is really manageable. It's really manageable. We're not there yet, but isn't it a basic human impulse here to at least want to allow for that hope to be open and, okay, let's get more information. This is encouraging. The media, on the other hand, just keeps shouting down how Trump has overpromised on this, how Trump is telling people this is a cure. That's just not true. Why do they have to? This has been a consistent problem with the way they've covered Donald Trump. They say he's so horrible, and then they have to lie about what he says. If he's so terrible, or if he's done something that's so egregious, just tell us what he actually said. Stop misrepresenting it. They misrepresent him all the time. I mean, one of their favorite ways to do it is to act like they don't really speak English and they can understand, if he uses sarcasm or if he is intentionally using hyperbole to make a point, or, they pretend that they don't understand that. Trump said he's the greatest in the world, and there are no empirical studies comparing him to every other human being, so clearly he's not the greatest in the world. They think this is journalism. And journalism in this country is dead. It's been dead for a long time. We have warring propaganda machines and activists and opinion. And it's largely because, one, Twitter has destroyed journalism insofar as we see all these hacks. We see the frauds. We see people like, all the reporters of the New York Times, Tapper and the rest of that crew over at CNN. You look at their Twitter feeds. They're libs. It's obvious. And they're pushing for certain agendas. It couldn't be any more clear. But then they turn around and say, no, we're just neutral journalists, right? It's garbage. It's garbage. But they really have a hard time, it seems, allowing the president that space to try to express the hopefulness of the American people right now that we get through this. You know, they say they want to save maximum lives. This is what the left and the Democrats keep coming back to. They just want to save lives. Nothing else matters to them. Shut it down as long as you want, as long as it takes. And then we say, all right, but what about this treatment? This treatment could save a lot of lives. They go, oh, this treatment could be toxic. This treatment could prevent other people that need this drug from getting this drug. Okay, well, we'll make more of the drug. We'll find a way to make sure that we get this to people who need it. But why always downplaying it? Why always telling us the same? They ask Fauci the same GD question every press conference. You know, whoa, did the president overpromise this? And he goes, no, the president didn't overpromise on it. You know, we're trying to save lives. You know, it's the same thing every time. You sit around and you say, okay, well, a normal person would be rooting for this in the most clear way possible because it would mean lives would be saved. Why is it so hard for the media to take that position? It's a fair question to ask, my friends, and it's one that they don't have any answers for.
Today, every patriotic American heart beats in solidarity with the incredible people of New York and New Jersey. They've really become a very hot zone, but some very good things are happening. In New York, the first time where the deaths were less from the previous day. That's the first drop so far, so maybe that's a good sign. It could be. And the hospital levels are starting to perhaps decrease. It's been very short, but perhaps decrease. So we wish Governor Cuomo and all of the people in New York great, and New Jersey, your governor's doing a great job. He's doing a great job in New Jersey. They got hit very hard. I just want to say that the full power of the American government and American enterprise, it really is. This is an all-out military operation that we've waged, and especially over the last number of weeks.
New York is in a rough spot, no doubt about it. It's tough here in the city. I've been talking to friends of mine. They say, what's it like? And there's the sense that you have from being out on the streets. I mean, seeing all these businesses closed, the lack of activity, that's very, very distressing. There's a big spike in burglaries of businesses, 75% spike in the last month, which is unsurprising because you got all these businesses shut down. There's no one there. And so if they have any inventory that somebody wants, and there's far fewer cops. I mean, here Cuomo is saying a lot of city personnel in New York and New York City in particular are out sick with COVID-19. Play 13.
How does the city function with 1 out of every 5 officers off the street?
Well, Anna, we have that all across the board. We have police officers who are getting sick, FDNY fire department people who are getting sick, transit workers who are getting sick, bus drivers, subway operators, and on top of that, the healthcare staff that has the highest rate of sickness. So there's no easy answer. You know, you do the best you can. Again, we're deploying assets from all across the state. So if you get to a situation where the New York City Police Department was so short on staff, we would bring in state police and we'd bring in police from other areas. The most difficult.
Are you there yet?
We're not there yet, no.
Well, that's good news and a whole bunch of bad news. At least it's not so bad they have to call in the state police into New York City. Keep in mind, New York City has over 30,000 officers in the NYPD, so it's an enormous police force, the biggest police force in the country. And I think there's always this stat you'll hear about for standing armies. The NYPD alone would be in the top, the top 20 standing armies in the world or something like that. Yeah, I think that's a urban legend, but I mean, I don't know what those numbers really are. Over 30,000 doesn't seem that big to me. For a military, it's certainly very large for a police force. This is the problem you've got right now. The city is not able to function normally at all, and that's going to get worse and worse the longer that we have the shutdown in effect. I think the economics of the shutdown are going to become more apparent to people. It's just some other observations I have. And this is, you're trying to find not even just silver linings. These are just observations. It's truly amazing to walk outside now and the clarity of the cleanliness of the air, because there's no cars really on the road here. It's all of a sudden like, it reminds me of when I used to go on camping trips in the middle of nowhere, Canada, there's a crispness and the air quality it's remarkable. It's like I'm in the Swiss Alps or something all of a sudden, which reminds me of maybe why I need to move out of New York even when all this is done. There's also no honking, which is really the rhythm and the sound of New York City is constant honking in the background. There's no honking because there's no cars on the road. So there's just these little things you pick up that are so different about life here right now.